Picture this. Sunday night. You've taken your kids to the zoo. Normal weekend stuff. You're tired, they're happy, everyone's ready to go home. But you can't leave. The gates are locked. Outside, the city is on fire. That's not a metaphor. That is what happened in Guadalajara, Mexico, on the night of February 22nd, 2026. Over 1,000 civilians, families, children, grandparents, trapped inside the zoo as the streets outside burned. They slept on buses. They waited for dawn. Nobody could tell them when it would be safe to leave. When we talk about cartel violence, it can be easy for it to feel abstract. Numbers, body counts, headlines. But those families in that zoo represent the human cost of what happens when a large criminal organization enters a period of acute instability. Because outside those walls, Mexico was burning. 250 roadblocks across 20 states. Flights grounded. National Guard convoys ambushed. One name at the center of all of it. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, El Mencho. And on that Sunday night, he was dead. Before we get to the man himself, let's look at what happened in the hours after his death, because the scale of the response is difficult to overstate. 73 confirmed dead. 25 of them were National Guard members killed in Jalisco alone. The rest, of bystanders and people who were simply in the wrong place on the wrong highway at the wrong moment. 250 burning roadblocks, 20 states, same country, same night. Security analysts describe this not as spontaneous grief, but as a coordinated response, planned in advance, triggered by a single signal. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel, the CJNG, appears to have had a contingency protocol built into their command structure. El Mencho's death activated it. Masked operatives forced civilian cars off highways at gunpoint. Witnesses describe men firing at moving vehicles. The margin between surviving that night and not was, in some cases, literally inches. Mexican authorities described the situation as, quote, normal operations. 250 fires, 20 states. That gap between official statements and documented ground conditions is worth noting. It will come up again. So who was El Mencho? And why did his death produce this scale of response? Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes was considered by law enforcement agencies to be one of the most dangerous and elusive criminal figures of the 21st century. The United States government had placed a $15 million bounty on his head, higher than the bounty placed on El Chapo at the height of his power, and for years he was not found. He was not born into an established criminal family. He grew up in Michoacan, worked as a farm laborer, was arrested in California in the 1990s on drug charges, deported, and built his way up to leading what security analysts describe as the most territorially aggressive cartel in Mexican history. Researchers who study organized crime point to his understanding of local economic conditions, loyalty structures, and the strategic use of violence as key factors in the CJNG's expansion. The CJNG's model differed from that of the Sinaloa cartel. Rather than prioritizing negotiation and corruption as primary tools, the CJNG relied heavily on escalating force to neutralize resistance. In roughly 15 years, the organization expanded from a regional presence in Jalisco to operations documented in over 40 countries, and then in the mountain town of Tapalpa, Jalisco, that ended. The operation that led to El Mencho's death began on February 20th, 2026, 2 days before the final assault. According to official accounts, intelligence services did not locate him through a tip line or random surveillance. They tracked a trusted associate connected to his romantic partner. It is a pattern seen repeatedly in high-value fugitive cases. The human connections that provide comfort also create exposure. By February 21st, his location was confirmed. A three-pronged military operation was authorized, involving ground units, special operations personnel, and 6 helicopters. His personal bodyguards formed a defensive perimeter. He attempted to flee into surrounding brush under fire. He was found critically wounded, along with 2 members of his security detail. A decision was made to transport him by air to Mexico City for medical treatment. He died during the transfer. The man who had avoided the intelligence apparatus of 2 countries for over a decade died in a helicopter somewhere between Jalisco and the capital. No trial, no extradition. a medical evacuation that did not succeed. To understand what his death means going forward, it helps to understand what the CJNG actually is as an organization. When authorities searched the Tapalpa compound, they recovered rocket launchers, 7 long-range firearms, grenades, and 8 vehicles. That was one location. Security and defense researchers estimate the CJNG fields roughly 20,000 armed personnel equipped with military-grade weapons. A supporting network of an estimated 100,000 people handles logistics, finance, transportation, and other operational functions across 40 countries. The organization also manufactures its own armored vehicles, referred to locally as narcotanques, constructed with heavy iron plating. Documented footage shows these vehicles operating in populated areas. Analysts who study Mexico's security situation consistently describe the CJNG not as a conventional criminal gang, but as a non-state armed group with capabilities that present a serious challenge to state security forces. That framing, while significant, reflects documented assessments rather than editorial opinion. That force now has no confirmed leader, which is where the situation becomes most unpredictable. The CJNG is estimated to generate approximately $12 billion annually, according to financial crime researchers and law enforcement assessments. The organization is documented as a major supplier of fentanyl and synthetic methamphetamine to markets in the United States and elsewhere. Its financial infrastructure extends into real estate, legitimate business sectors, and according to multiple investigations, political systems across Latin America, Europe, and parts of Asia. When a leader of this organization dies without a designated successor, the practical question for the remaining command structure is straightforward. Who holds authority now, and why should anyone accept it? That question does not have an agreed answer, and that is the core of what analysts are currently watching. 2 figures are considered the most likely candidates for succession based on their documented roles within the organization. Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia, referred to internally as La Jefa, is El Mencho's wife. Investigators and journalists who cover organized crime in Mexico have documented her role not as a passive figure, but as the primary financial administrator of the cartel. She is credited with building and managing the money laundering and investment infrastructure that sustained the organization through periods of operational pressure. Institutional knowledge of that kind carries significant organizational weight. Juan Carlos Gonzalez, known internally as R3, is El Mencho's stepson. He commands the CJNG's enforcement arm, the operational unit associated with the organization's most militarized actions. If Gonzalez Valencia controls the financial architecture, R3 controls the armed component. Whether those 2 figures can coordinate, and whether the broader organization will accept their authority, remains an open question. The CJNG is not a centralized hierarchy. It functions as a federation of regional commanders who held personal loyalty to El Mencho. That loyalty does not transfer automatically. 2 regional figures are considered particularly significant in assessing whether the organization holds together. El Jardinero, meaning the gardener, controls operations in Nayarit, including large-scale synthetic drug manufacturing facilities that form a critical part of the fentanyl supply chain. He commands independent forces and generates independent revenue. El Sapo, meaning the toad, is the plaza boss in Puerto Vallarta, controlling a coastal corridor of significant logistical value. He is documented as operating with a high degree of autonomy and has a reputation, even within cartel circles, for extreme violence. If either commander concludes that the family succession is not in their interest, the result would not simply be a defection. It would create an adversarial internal conflict layered on top of ongoing tensions with state security forces and rival organizations. For historical context, when Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was extradited to the United States in 2017, the Sinaloa cartel underwent a significant fracture. The instability that followed created territorial openings that the CJNG exploited to expand. The current situation presents a comparable dynamic, with the positions now reversed. So where does the situation currently stand? 73 deaths in the immediate aftermath of El Mencho's death is not likely to be the final toll. Security analysts in Mexico are focused not on whether further violence will occur, but on its projected scale, and how long any internal conflict might last. For people living in affected regions of Mexico, this is not an abstract question. It is a question about road safety, about whether schools open, about whether the events of February 22nd in Guadalajara repeat themselves. For policymakers and researchers in the United States, it raises questions about drug supply chains, border security, and how a major trafficking organization functions through a leadership transition. El Mencho is dead. The organization he led is not. Its personnel, finances, and operational capacity remain largely intact. The variable that has changed is the leadership structure at the top. In federated criminal organizations, that kind of vacancy does not produce stability. It produces competition for position and the violence that accompanies it. The head of the organization has been removed. What comes next depends on decisions being made right now by people whose names most of the world does not yet know. This story is not close to over. We are watching the beginning of whatever comes next.